This time we are watching former Crazy House World Champion Opperwezen versus burpcow. Opperwezen of the Netherlands and burpcow from Canada. And if we look at the overall standings, we see that Opperwezen is placed third when it comes to winning percentage. In the lead there we have Katask with an impressive 90%, followed by Jan Lee on 73%. Opperwezen is still undefeated. He has won 4 matches and tied 1. Maybe he can pose some problems to Katask, who is the favorite to take this and be the future challenger of reigning world champion Yasugi 99. I saw that both players are online, probably getting ready to start the match. Opperwezen is rated maybe 100 points above burpcow, and actually I think this is burpcow's last match of the tournament. Yeah, he has only 1 match remaining, and he won't have anything to do with the outcome here. He has a rather low winning percentage, 33%. But he's a very dangerous opponent, and we will see some interesting games here. Before this match, Opperwezen is in the lead in their mutual encounters by 10-3. And this match will contain 10 games. Regardless of the outcome, we will see 10 fantastic Crazy House games. And we'll be watching this from the view of Opperwezen. I know that Opperwezen likes to sacrifice this knight. Maybe we will see d5. He has also toyed with the idea of d6, even provoking the white to take on f6, spending a tempo on it. So Opperwezen is very familiar with this type of position. And if white takes here on f6, black gets a very nice setup here on the king's side, and it's hard for the white pieces to find square, especially this knight. So it might look as if the d5 pawn was hanging, but I think black has some trick up his sleeve then. Is it knight takes e5, or yeah, I think so. And speaking of knight takes e5, sometimes black could take here on c3 and maybe take on e5, because after bishop takes d7 you have knight takes back. But this isn't the right moment, perhaps. And hello everybody in the chat. Nice to see you here. Do we have any predictions about the outcome? Black just preparing to castle king's side and maybe push the f pawn forward 1 or 2 steps. So the knight b5 back to d3 bishop maneuver sort of tricked black to leave his bishop behind this wall of pawns. So this is slightly passive now. At some point I think black will need to push the f-pawn, and maybe this bishop can get out this way then. Maybe black is worried about castling kingside because of knight at h5, followed by a piece sacrifice on g7. So indeed black goes for the f pawn push. And if white doesn't take here on f6, black should be really happy, I think. This knight is on e4 is looking really strong, unless white takes on f6. Both players have spent a lot of time here. And this is a big decision for burpcow. Okay, so he leaves it on f5 and goes after the g7 pawn instead. And now black isn't so worried about a sacrifice here, because with the f pawn here on f5 instead, the black king has much more space. Probably just take on f6 a couple of times. And black looks just fine. Material is slightly in black's favor right now, but white has an initiative. So the question is whether black should put it in the corner or down on g8. There could be some issues here on the diagonal, but black is prepared to give this rook, I think. Let's say bishop e5 or bishop g5. Black will just leave the rook on f6, mend those dark squares. So black is trying to control the f7 square, avoiding any knight f7 tricks. So finally maybe this bishop will get useful. Yeah. So this bishop is actually a good defender here. And black cannot take on f6 because of queen at f8, a white queen, and then followed by a pawn on g7, which is mate. Last few seconds here. This knight is still covering f7. Problems here for white. Black has perfect control. He will start pushing the white queen around, and yeah, this is just over. Nice defense there by opperwezen, who takes the lead by 1-0. I think we will see a variety of openings from opperwezen. So this little bishop excursion provoked this ambitious setup, which also might prove to be a weakness, because if black castles kingside, h4 might come, maybe putting pressure on those pawns, trying to open the h5. So indeed white plays h4, and if black takes here, white will take, and the g pawn is falling, but white has 3 pieces pointing towards the g pawn, so how can black defend it? He could push the h pawn, but that would weaken the dark squares. Burpcow spending a lot of time here in a position that he should be fairly familiar with. Not sure, maybe white can take here and put another knight on e5. Because what would black defend that pawn with? Oh, that's interesting. Opperwezen has these little tricks at times. If black takes here, you can take c6, and then e7 is hanging. But this move hits the bishop and it hits c2. I'm not sure if bishop a6 was a good move or just a funny move or what it was. Has white accomplished something here? I'm not sure. So this puts some pressure here on the light squares. Maybe at some point white might even consider taking on f7. Another useful move could be rook c1, just protecting the c2 square and offering some chances maybe of, I don't know, taking on d5. Yeah, very natural move. This knight is protecting d3. So it would seem like white has everything under control here. Maybe knight at f4 is a move that is coming. When indeed maybe taking on d5 would be a threat. Burpcow has problems finding a decent move here. So he tries to get rid of this, so the d3 pawn will be hanging. And white goes after the light squares. The h5 will be open and h6 will be hanging pretty soon here. Although white needs to be a bit careful. So he takes here. Maybe he will sacrifice on h7. Is that the idea? If black had taken here on g6, the queen takes and you threaten to take on h6. And now maybe pawn at g6. So is this a time for pawn at g6 maybe? Quite close to mate here. Maybe diag here and then take on e7 and pick up a rook for either h7 or g8. Now you have knight f7 maybe. Lots of ideas here for white. And this sort of opens the h file. Now this is just over. Too many threats to deal with. Knight here maybe. Pick up e7. So maybe knight f8. And a pretty little finish, rook g8 or knight g6. 2-0, opperwezen. So completely different line, e4, e5. Let's see who is the better prepared player in this very sharp line. Like it's sacrificing a pawn just to get a quick development. Now we can develop the bishop maybe. And putting the extra pawn on f3 wouldn't be a spectacular way of using that extra pawn, and probably wouldn't give white any advantage. So white has to be more ambitious than that. Now g5 might be hanging at some point. Let's say if you take on d5 and you can take here maybe. Because this does weaken the white king. Maybe it's too early for a knight takes d5. Should you just go back maybe? Oh, thank you so much, Venomous. Another move could be knight f5. He does indeed take on d5 here. Very short position now. And not clear at all what is happening. So at the moment, material is balanced. There is a weak square here on e2. So let's say white takes here. Pawn at e2 looks dangerous. This move attacks the queen and also protects d2. So one problem for black is he can't take on f3 because of knight takes here, and if you take the queen, white has bishop e7 followed by queen g8 and a smothered mate here on f7. So inviting a queen trade here, which would be good for black because it's mate here on e2. This knight will have to go back unless, of course, white is willing to move his king. But maybe after king f1 you can take on f3, because then you have pawn at e2 check. So after the knight takes here, you have, is this mate? Knight here. What about king goes to g3? I just don't see it here for black. But probably it's because I'm blind. Knight takes, knight g4, king g3. Burpcow doesn't see the mate either. So is there something with pawn here? No. King can go to h4 then. Oh, this is cute. Okay, so king h3, knight f2 mate. Wow. And what about king h5? And let me just check and show. That was a spectacular finish by opperwezen. Very, very cute. So if the king goes Here, it's double checkmate. Very nice finish. Let's go back to the game. And we are following Opperwezen, who is in the lead 3-0. Now we see the same line that Opperwezen plays. The piece sacrifice line. And I was wondering about taking here. But maybe knight takes and knight takes on f7 is dangerous. So what should black do here? Maybe just play e6 first to avoid any e5, e6 tricks, and then force a trade here. It would be nice to get the bishop out. Let's say black succeeds in playing a6 and then can recapture here. The bishop could continue to b5 then. So white putting some pressure here on e4. Although, what about a6 here? Because after bishop takes, the bishop could take, and then the knight on e4 would be protected by the pawn and the bishop. And also, in case of some sacrifice here on f7, the king could take and then run over here to the queen side. So this bishop has some prospects now. It's defending this fellow, and at some point you could move it to b5 also. Black might even consider taking twice here on g5, because he has a lot of scope for his light pieces. But surely just running with the king is a safer option. I'm not sure why you should leave the e6 pawn hanging though. Because now white gets 2 pawns for the piece. I wonder how you continue here as white. Do you play knight g5 maybe? Castling long here as black might be dangerous actually because of pawn a7 when it could just be queening. Very murky position here. What's happening? Yeah, hide over here, eyeing the escape route for the black king. Pawn f7 coming soon. Looks dangerous for black now. Burpcow thinking and thinking. What if we just take this? All sorts of nasty things happening too. Yeah, you have knight f7. Pick up the rook. And this is over. Den scale 1, 2, 3. Right now we're watching a candidate match, so I cannot play against you. But maybe after they finish this. And knight here, rook or e6. A lot of mating possibilities there in the end. And opperwezen takes this for 0. So instead of the e4, e5 opening, we see in burpcow opening with d4 instead. Opperwezen just copying burpcow at the moment. And as long as your opponent is making good moves, there's nothing wrong with copying him. And as soon as the opponent makes a bad move, then it's time to deviate. Although I should mention that the copycat strategy is it's not so good if you're not careful, because if your opponent mates you, you won't get a chance to mate him the next move. So maybe take here, put the knight on f4. Oh, thank you, by the way, for subscribing. Aha to Kia. So maybe a6 is useful. Black doesn't have to worry about this pin anymore. But how to solve the development of the black bishop? Do you go g6 or g5 even and put it on g7, or what do you do? Now d5 is under attack. White is threatening to take here and take on d5. So both players playing safely here in the opening. Not much going on yet. So this is a bit of a problem. Doesn't have a future over here. So maybe white can swing it over to the king side somehow. Although abandoning the e4 square might be a problem also. So this is a move, putting the bishop on the board. But yeah, white wouldn't want to allow knight takes h3, and bishop takes, pawn takes, opens the h file. So white had better just keep on protecting that h3 bishop. I'm surprised to see that how much time the players are spending here. Of course, there's much to think about, but you would like to have some time left when the really critical positions arise. Black is just keeping the tension here on the king's side. Avoiding any bishop takes here, bishop takes e6 tricks. And white tries to improve on the queen side. So I have a feeling this position will just explode pretty soon. Tension is building up. Now there's a threat of taking on h3 and taking on h4. But c6 is hanging, so black doesn't quite have the time. So allowing queen d7 here. Black wisely avoiding to take here because this king needs some shelter, and this isn't much of a threat. This bishop is protected, and I'm thinking this is looking difficult for black now. He must have missed bishop takes here. Really hard to defend the first rank for black, and opperwezen oversteps the time limit, making this 4-1. Burpcow finally won a game. But it looked like opperwezen was doing quite alright in the defense there. Right up to the bitter end, yeah. This is unclear, and this is actually really good for black. Yes, I was thinking about this move. Just take the knight, and then you have all sorts of threats. Because even though the white pieces look dangerous, e7 is protected. So black missed a chance there, and then black is better. Black could take on g5. And actually, opperwezen missed a mate here. Knight check, and white cannot take with this because of queen check here, so he needs to take with the h-pawn. And then you take with the rook here. If white places something on h2, black can just take it, so you need to take with this. And then pawn here on g2, sorry, on g2. And if white takes, you have bishop f3, queen g2, and if the king goes here, you under promote. And then knight f3, and it's mate. Okay, back to the game. That would have been a cute finish. So another d4, d5 positional struggle here. Actually, I'm a bit surprised that opperwezen missed that mate, because he's usually very good at finding those. So, pointing in both directions here, also covering f4. So what does white play here? Rook c1 looks sensible. Maybe you could start moving in this direction also. Bringing the queen out looks very threatening, but also sometimes it can backfire because it's possible for the opponent to start threatening the queen and bringing pieces quickly to the board without allowing, in this case, white to place his pieces. Placing pieces with tempo is usually very good. Okay, so there's a tactical idea. Maybe taking on d5, and if black takes back, you can take on f5. And you cannot really protect it by bishop g6, because then white takes and then c7 is hanging. So what do you do here with black? Maybe after knight takes g3, it's possible to take on g7. Bishop takes and pawn h6. So I'm thinking take here on g6 and then take c7. Why not? That should be a useful pawn. It's hard to protect the g5 square. White has pawn g5 here if he wants to. Actually, it looks quite good. Pawn g5. So white can just take here on g3, and now, for instance, bishop h5, I would snap this bishop, take on h6 also, because black cannot take back because of knight f6 check. Yeah, and indeed, opperwezen takes on h5. This is looking grim. Four light pieces ready to attack the black king side. And simply step into the corner. Oh, can you even take the knight maybe? Yeah. Black just doesn't have enough. And there's that cute little bug again, telling me I have quite an audience. Nice to see you, everybody. 5-1 opperwezen. So a little battle here for e5. And probably knight g6, hoping to open the h file at some point. And has burpcow run out of ideas? Bishop g3 makes sense, because bishop taking here would strengthen the white center. Another generic move would be to just play queen e2 maybe. You might consider pushing the h-pawn, but it's quite slow. And perhaps black is getting ready to push that knight away from e5. Yes, there comes f6. So no more grip over the e5 square. Although e6 is slightly weakened here. And this is probably about evacuating f4 and put a knight here at some point. Knight f4. And I would have put the knight here first, I think, before you trade on f5. because that makes it slightly more awkward to protect e6. For instance, this move wouldn't have been possible. So now maybe white is hoping to take here and take on d5. White black just protecting everything from behind. Black is looking quite okay, I think. He could place a bishop here, protecting d5 and g6. And black has enough resources to defend. And actually I'm starting to like black here because he has a way to increase the pressure here on the b file. He already has the half semi-open e file. Black has great freedom where to put his light pieces. So this is an aggressive move. Black probably wants to take the pawn on g2. Why is the screen jumping back and forth here? Also, this knight is protecting g6. So either queen f7 or maybe queen b7 even. Queen e4. Okay, so threatening mate, threatening the knight. Although the knight isn't really threatened, because if the queen takes here, you have knight at... Oh, he didn't have a knight, sorry. Because that's usually a trick. Well, now you can just take on f4. Threatening g2. That was a blunder. Burpcow disgusted, resigning immediately. 6-1 opperwezen. And opperwezen needs a big win here, considering that Katask beat Burpcow 10-0. Hi everybody. Oh, Yasugi is watching. What do you think about the match so far? I don't think this is something that scares you. Burpcow spending way too much time here. And why is the screen jumping back and forth? Very annoying. So I don't know how useful this move is, but white has the simple plan of just playing bishop d3, knight e2, castle short, And I myself, I really like when I get to take towards the center like this. This reminds a lot about the game we just watched. Same pawn structure. It's just that opperwezen is playing white instead of black. So I was thinking maybe take on d4, place the bishop here on e3. I don't know. Probably wasn't anything. But at some point it could be a tactic that works. Taking here and placing something here. Let's say after white castles. So now maybe bishop taking e6 is a threat. Knight takes, and then it could proceed to g7. And if black is forced to play bishop at d7 to protect e6, it's a slight positional concession. Burpcow spending way too much time here. He will miss those valuable seconds. Taking on e6 does not look as promising as it did before, because the king is not in the center anymore. Let's say bishop. Okay, he takes with the knight. And maybe pawn h6. Well, it does have compensation here. You got two pawns, so material-wise, it's pretty even. The d5 pawn is hanging, but wow, now this is really sharp. Because if you take, and the h5 was hanging also. Heavies might be traded. And if white takes here, queen takes, the e pawn might be hanging also. So once again, h5 is hanging. Wow. Quickly taking on h5 because knight g6 is coming. And burpcow reckons it's too dangerous to allow, but the medicine is just worse than the disease here. White has a huge material lead. He could even just go back with the queen if he likes to. D5 is hanging. Very sorry. And the black pieces are just too passive. But Opper is down to his last seconds also. Burpcow already playing just on extra time. So bishop at e6 maybe. Yeah, protecting that valuable knight. Trapping the queen. And now you just start promoting. Let's get some queens. And this isn't much of a threat. Just keep on putting those pawns on the 7th rank. Take on g8 and knight f7 mate. 7-1 opperwezen. 2 games to go. We see the same opening as in the first game. And this time black doesn't allow the pin. Just defending the knight on e4. So black needs to play active here, because if he just plays e6, knight c6, pretty soon he will start to run out of moves to make. We saw this in the Jan Lee match yesterday, where he handled the white position very nicely. Just making use of the extra space. Opperwezen struggling to find a plan here for black. And indeed white has more useful moves to make than black has. Nice little space advantage for white here. A strong grip in the center. Although black doesn't have any apparent weaknesses so far. nice but perhaps a little passive defensive move, which gives black time to start his h-pawn running. And if you take here, bishop takes c1, knight at f6, pawn takes, knight takes, queen takes, pawn takes. Black is probably more than okay. So this contains a little tactical threat here of rook takes b7, rook takes, and queen takes c6. So black wisely protects the knight on c6. But now taking on h5 makes even more sense. I was wondering, why didn't he take on h5 and then simply knight at f6 check? Standard tactical trick, because if white takes here, black will take on d7. Black taking the opportunity to castle kingside and now threatening to take on a6. I wonder if black will try to get rid of this knight. Pawn at g5 maybe? No, he goes after the queen. And we see the same tactical idea once again. Picking up a pawn here on e5. That's funny. And this doesn't look good because now black can take on f4 and then knight e2. Yeah, queen takes f4. I'm sure opperwezen won't miss this chance. And this looks like it's over now. Simply knight here, queen takes f3, and then just keep on taking whatever. Okay, he has, yeah, queen g4. Nice there by opperwezen, 8-1, and this is the final game of the evening. In this position, I prefer to have played knight f3 so I can react with knight e5. Because then bishop d6 isn't as attractive, I think. And as long as black avoids taking here on f4, this knight will be standing in the way of the development of the white pieces. And black won't be taking on f4. Black will just finish his development wonder if black could go knight h5. Just to provoke a trade here on d6. Black is looking fine here. He's finished his development. King is safe. White is lagging slightly. I'm wondering, maybe knight h5 now. Because I don't quite see where white is putting his king. The queen side looks just too open, and let's say knight h5. A lot of trades, and when the king castles kingside, g3 will be a weakness. Also, if you trade a lot, maybe knight c4 hitting e3 is interesting. Hitting e3 and the queen and b2, I should say. Now if black gets his hands on a knight, knight takes d4 followed by pawn e3 might be an interesting idea. Very symmetrical position here. Opperwezen up slightly on time. I wonder if black could go g5 here. Does look a bit dangerous to open in front with your king, but it does trap the bishop on h4. So this looks a bit passive, but black has the idea of playing knight to b4 maybe at some point. Right now it's covered. So a lot of pressure here on the bishop. Black regretting putting his queen on d7. Harry is back to defend the bishop. And now d6 might be hanging. White could consider taking somewhere, maybe h6, put something here. The dark squares are looking weak now, bishop h6. So, if the king takes, you have e4. Probably e4 coming. The bishop check first. I don't really see why, but okay, never mind. Under promoting was necessary because black had stuff like knight at f2, and this poor guy is bound to die if only opperwezen can find the right moves here. Now he has a pawn for g4, and h4 is mate. Impressive victory here by opperwezen, and this tournament is still alive and kicking. I don't know if someone already put the result here. Opperwezen against burpcow. No, not yet. But this was the final match of burpcow, and I would like to thank him. He has played some really interesting crazy house, and it's been nice to follow him in a lot of matches. I would also like to thank the audience tonight. Thanks for watching, and I will see you around. Bye bye.